This is the Tree of Life, Season 25, Chapter 4. In this episode, we will be bringing together our discussion of boundaries and integrating our discussion of habits to sequential substitution events. In Season 25, Chapter 2, we talked about boundaries as the limits of reverse substitution and substitution events. The idea was that beyond some boundary, we do not consent to the interaction, we negate our responses, whilst within that boundary we acquiesce to interactions. Following from this, most of our everyday interactions, which are not out of the ordinary, fall within reverse substitution events, pursuant to the tautological flow of consciousness from vessel to vessel. It is only on or beyond the boundary, when negation, eventually leading to acquiescence, where we see substitution events occur. Now, our habits define our boundaries. In everyday life, we have expectations about our environment and other people's behavior. These expectations form based upon our habits. The more stringent these expectations, the more likely others, or our environment, will cross these boundaries. Stringent expectations about our environment arise out of firmly rooted habits. These habits can either create strict expectations about the people around us, or they can create looser expectations, depending upon the nature of the habit. For example, a person who spends a great deal of time alone, and either resents the company of others as a result, or if this resentment is the cause of the habit, may find that expectation, or boundary defeated by the intrusive intervention of some other. Habits thus create boundaries as they create expectations. Whereas, a person who maintains a habit to talk to strangers while they visit a cafe and drink their morning coffee will find those expectations defeated by a grumpy or intractable person. Now, commonly, when expectations are defeated, according to a habit or boundary, the result will either be negation and the creation of a substitution event, or expression of that frustration, and thus its absence. If that person who enjoys talking to strangers in a cafe finds that expectation met, the other meeting their expectations cordially, the result is a continuation of the tautological flow of consciousness from vessel to vessel. From this we can see that boundaries aren't static, and just as habits can be broken, what we expect from others and from ourselves can change. From last season, we talked about how the distance between substitutionary impulses in a transitionary structure, in sequential substitution, is determined by the context length. This context length determines the number of steps in dialectical degeneration, and plays a role in restricting whether a person is able to experience infinite recursion. Often, hierarchies play a key role in restricting this context length. If you imagine that these two sets represent a choice, the relative distance between them determines the scale of the shift in behavior represented by the flipping of phase. If the context length is longer, then so too will be the change represented by the choice between the two dialectical sets. In the complete series, we talked about the importance of habit breaking in creating glitches. In recent episodes, we also talked about the importance of stretching the context length in experiencing infinite recursion. There is a nexus between these two ideas. Making larger steps between patterns of behavior created by habits can alter the distance represented by substitutionary impulses within a sequential substitution event. Likewise, becoming restricted by habits in such a way that every intervention is met by negation results in becoming increasingly ensconced in substitution events. The tautological flow of consciousness from vessel to vessel is as much about an internal acquiescence represented by emotional coupling with the incoming consciousness, as it is about shifting habits in response to the expectations of others. For our grumpy or intractable person in the cafe, meeting the expectations of the talkative person in violation of habit represents a readmittance to the tautological flow. Just as the incoming consciousness assists on the inside with expression of an impulse already acquiesced to, sometimes the force of another's expectations can play a role in animating an external reunion with humanity. Now, the tautological flow of consciousness from vessel to vessel abhors these boundaries. Just as the tautological flow naturally seeks to expand through our awareness, so too does it seek to expand from vessel to vessel. So, barriers, or stringent expectations upon others will see attempts to compel acquiescence at the limits of our boundaries. These interventions will often entail intuitive knowledge that these others should not know by their own linear experience. That's the end of the podcast for today.